All right, so this is a just a short video for section 3.4. I'm going to do about 6 problems. And so the first one starts with section 3.4, number 17. It says determine whether the two lines are parallel, perpendicular, coinciding, or only intersecting. And so the first thing that you have to know is if two lines are parallel, if I were to graph two lines and they're parallel, then the one thing that we know about them, if this is line 1, let me just rewrite that as line 1 here. So if this is line 1 and this is line 2, then and if they're parallel, then the slopes for each one have to be equal to each other. Now, if the lines were perpendicular, in other words, if I have line 1 and then this is line 2, and when they intersect, they form a 90-degree angle, then that means that the slope of the first line times the slope of the second line would equal to -1. So there will be opposite reciprocals. And so here for this particular example, what we have to do is find out what is the slope of each line. And so I'm going to go ahead and call this one line 1. I'm going to call this one line 2. And so the slope for line 1 is -2. And the reason it is because this equation is in the form of y is equal to mx plus b. Now, line number 2 is in standard form, which is ax plus by is equal to c. And so there's two ways that we can find the slope. We can go ahead and solve for y. And so if I solve for y for line 2, then I'm going to subtract the 8x from both sides, right? And so I'll end up with 4y is equal to -8x plus 3. And then I divide everything by 4. So -8 divided by 4 is -2. And then this simply becomes 3/4. And then you can see that the slope of the second line is also -2. And so therefore, for this particular example, the lines are parallel. The other way that we could have found this slope, if it's in standard form, is by identifying your A and your B. In this case, your A is 8 and your B is 4. And so if it's in standard form, I can actually find the slope by just doing -a over b. Just be careful, because if a is originally negative, it'll be a negative and a negative, which would be a positive. And so in this example, my a is 8, so it'd be -8 over 4, which is -2. And so these two lines are parallel. And that's just another way to find the slope. For the next example, we're going to go ahead and do this exactly the same thing. And so just for the sake of time, since they're both in standard form, ax plus by is equal to c, I have two ways. I can solve for y, or I can just go ahead and use the formula, which is m is equal to -a over b. And so this will be my line 1, this will be my line 2. So my slope, well, actually my line number 1, my a is equal to -9 and my b is equal to 3, which means that the slope is -a over b, which will be -9. That's what I mentioned in the previous example. And so it'll just be 9 over 3, which is 3. So the slope for the first line is 3. And now let's go ahead and do the slope for the second line. So line 2, a is equal to 1. B is equal to 3. So the second slope will be -a, again, -a over b, which will be -1 over 3, which is just simply -1/3. And so they're obviously not parallel because the slopes are not equal to each other. So the next thing we have to find out, if I were to multiply the first slope times the second slope, do I get -1? And so the first slope is 3. The second slope is -1/3. And then you can see that that's -3 over 3, which is in fact -1. So then these two lines in this particular example are perpendicular. And so for number 19, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to find out if they're parallel, perpendicular, coinciding, or intersecting. And so we can see that line 1 is a horizontal line. And so the slope for line 1 is actually equal to 0, right? And so, and because if I were to graph this, right, if this was an X and Y plane, this would be going this way down here, and this is y is equal to -8. And so now my first slope is 0, and so let me go ahead and find the second slope. And so what happens here is that I can actually, if I solve for y, right, I divide both sides by -2, which will give me 4. And so y is equal to 4. Let me move this over here so we can see it. So my first slope is equal to 0. If I were to graph y is equal to 4, it would be up here somewhere, right? And this is y is equal to 4. And then you can clearly see that the second slope is also equal to 0. So then these two lines are parallel. All right, let's go to the next example. Let me go back here to read what it is that they're asking us to do. And so for this example, they're asking us to write the equation of the line that is perpendicular. And so it's perpendicular to this equation and passes through this point. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to find what is the slope of the first line they gave us. And so the slope of the first line is 6/5, right? And so we said that if the lines are perpendicular, then there are opposite reciprocals. In other words, if I multiply m1 times my m2, I would get -1. Another way to think about these is that they're opposite reciprocals. And so the second slope then would be -5/6. So I just take the reciprocal and change the sign. So it's -5/6. So I'm going to use this information and this point to find the equation of the line that is perpendicular to L1 and passes through -6,3. And so there's several ways that we can do this. I like to use the y is equal to mx plus b. And so that's my x and that's my y. I do have my m. And so if I plug in these values into this equation, I get 3 is equal to -5/6 times -6 plus b. And if you notice, I'm just solving for b here. And so 3 is equal to 30/6 plus b. And that's going to be 5 plus b, right? -6 times -5 is +30. And then if I subtract 5 from both sides, I'll get -2. And I get that b is equal to -2. So now I have my y-intercept. If you remember, this is my y-intercept. And I also have my slope. And so the answer to this one would be y is equal to -5/6x minus 2. And so this line is perpendicular to, or my L2 is perpendicular to my first line and passes through the point -6,3. And then, so the next question will be question number 21. And it says, let me get to this one so I can read it here real quick. It says that the average interest rate for a 15-year fixed rate mortgage is 6%. Then the corresponding 30-year fixed rate is 6.59%. If the 15-year rate decreases to 5% and the 30-year rate decreases to 5.39%. We're going to make the assumption that the relationship between the 15-year fixed rate percent and the 30-year fixed rate percent is linear. We're going to find the equation of the line that describes this relationship. And then we're going to write the answer in slope-intercept form. We're going to let x be the 15-year rate and y be the 30-year rate. And so what we have then here is we have for the first one 6 and 6.59. And then we have 5 and 5.39. And so we're going to go ahead and find the equation, right? And so the first thing we're going to do is find the slope. And if you remember, the formula for slope is equal to y2, m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to go ahead and label this just x1, y1. Doesn't really matter which one we do. We just have to label one of them. And so I'm going to go ahead and find my slope. So it's going to be, in this particular case, 5.39 minus 6.59 over 5 minus 6. And so what we're going to do now is just calculate this slope so we can find out what we have. So if I have 5.39 minus 6.59, then I get -1.2 over -1, which is a +1.2. And so Now what we're going to do is use this slope and one of these 2 points. I'm going to go ahead and use x1, y1. We'll do the same thing that we did in the previous example. And so we're going to have 6.59 is equal to 1.2 times 6 plus b. And so we have here that 6.59 is equal to 7.2. And then so we're going to subtract 7.2 from both sides. And we get that b is negative 0.61. So then our equation then would be y is equal to 1.2x minus 0.61. And so the next thing that we're going to do, and they're asking us here to find b. I'm going to go down here real quick. Let me rewrite my equation. So y is equal to 1.2x minus 0.61. And so what they're asking us to do is use the equation from part A to estimate a 30-year fixed rate if the 15-year fixed rate is 5.7. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and plug in 5.7, right, to solve for y. So 1.2 times 5.7 will give us 6.84 minus the 0.61. And so the answer we get is 6.23 or 6.23% for part B. Now, for number 22, we have to basically do the same thing. And for number 22, what they're asking us to do here is to an e-reader manufacturer expects to sell 50,000 units each year if the selling price is 220. If the selling price is reduced to 170, then the manufacturer expects to sell 140,000 units per year. Assume that the relationship between the selling price and the units sold in thousands is linear. Find the equation of the line that describes this relationship. Write your answer in slope-intercept form. Let x represent the selling price and y represent the units sold in thousands. And then part B, use the equation for part A to estimate the number of units that a manufacturer expects to sell if the selling price is $130. So first thing we're going to do is they're telling us that the price is, selling price is X and the units is Y, but it's also telling us it's in thousands. So the 50,000 is going to be represented by 50, and the 140,000 will be represented by 140. And so if I take this and I divide it by 1,000, I'll get rid of my zeros and I get 140. And that's how we arrive at the 50 and the 140. So the next thing we're going to do is just go ahead and find a slope. So this is my x1, y1. This is my x2, y2. So my slope is equal to 140 minus 50 over 170 minus 220. And so we're going to go ahead and subtract both of these. So we get 90, right, minus 90 over negative 50. And so we get negative 9 over 5 as the slope for this particular answer. So 140 minus 50 is 90, and then 170 minus 220 is negative 50. So it's negative 9 over 5. We can cancel out the zeros. So I'm going to go ahead and use the x1, y1. So it's going to be, again, we're going to use the y is equal to mx plus b, which is 50 is equal to negative 9 over 5 times 220 plus b. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to figure out, okay, so what is negative 9 over 5 times 220? So that's negative 1.8 times 220. So I get 50 is equal to negative 396 plus b. And so let's just double check that again to make sure. 9 divided by 5 is 1.8 times the negative 1. And so that's negative 1.8 times the 220 gives us negative 396. I'm going to add the 396 to both sides. And so I get 50 plus 396, and I get 446. So my y-intercept is 446, and then my equation becomes y is equal to negative 9 over 5x plus 446. And so part B is asking us to, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and go to the next slide. And so I have y is equal to negative 9 over 5x plus 446 is asking us if the selling price is 130, estimate the number of units. And so we're going to get 9 over 5 times 130 plus 446. So we know that it's going to be negative 1.8 times 130. So we get negative 234 plus 446. And so we get that y is equal to 212. So that means that if the price drops to $130 per unit, they're going to sell 212,000 units. And that is the end of this short video. Thank you.